Hello and welcome back for the latest edition of Rugby League Backchat. Last week was a big one in the world of rugby league as it was announced that New York and Ottawa are one step closer to entering the league structure in 2020. To discuss that with us, we have three very special guests, starting with the ex-chairman of Cronulla Sharks, Damian Irvine, the publisher of League Weekly, Danny Lockwood, and the big lead for New York, Ricky Wilby. Ricky, it would be wrong of me not to start with you. A big day last Thursday at the AJ Bell Stadium. You presented to clubs and ultimately you were given approval 19-4. How big a day was that in your aspirations to enter the league structure?
So far, obviously, it was a huge deal to get the club's approval of what we presented. Was a good indication of where we are, and hopefully over the next couple of months we can turn those four into positives as well.
I think you were the only person out of us four that was in the room, so you'll have to give us the inside scoop on what actually happened in that meeting. There was a lot of questions from the floor. We've been made aware of that. What were the big positives and the big concerns that were brought up by the clubs?
I mean, obviously the travel was a big concern, and I think we've eased those concerns by saying the quality of hotel that we're going to put teams in, and the fact that we'd fly teams business class using flight partners. So that was one big concern. The other one was player pool, and if we'd be a drain on the player pool, and again we tried to ease those fears by explaining our tryouts programme, and the fact that we've already got American players interested in coming and getting involved, both rugby league and rugby union players. So yeah, with a bit of luck, we'll have that American feel to our squad as well. Damian,
19-4. I think there was a feeling before the meeting it would probably be a little bit tighter than that. Were you surprised that the votes voted as comfortably in favour of the two bids as they did?
No, I wasn't, because look, first and foremost, it's how the vote is tabled as well. And this was an indication vote. I think if you'd said the clubs were voting on the actual decision, you might have seen a different vote. So it's very easy in principle to put your hand up and say, look, as long as we're not being told that this is a decisive vote, we'll go one way or the other. I think it's a fantastic result. I think it's nice to see clubs, I think, vote on the facts at hand, the presentations at hand, and not on political agendas, on what they feel is the right way to go because their friends are voting. I think it was a really good result for the game, and for Ricky, who I know has worked many months, years on this. There's been a lot of foundation and hard work put into this bid. This is not a fly-by-night, let's think about doing a New York bid. So just rewards. I think Ricky should be congratulated to get to this stage, and I hope it goes forward. I really do. It's interesting, the questions people ask, worried about travel. I think if we as a game are sitting down and as clubs, those are the main questions and concerns we've got to ask a bid, we're asking the wrong questions. Travel in professional sport in this day and age, it hasn't been an issue for the NRL for a long time, and some quick turnarounds, flying Townsville, Sydney, Auckland, 3.5 hours to Canberra on the coach, Melbourne. We go to Perth and play in the NRL, it's not a problem. So I'm a bit disappointed there weren't some more incisive questions asked and raised about why, or the ins and outs of the bid. But what I would know is that I think Ricky would have them answered because he's done a lot of thorough work.
Danny?
Yeah, thumbs up all round, I think, chaps. I think everybody that's got the game's growth and prosperity at heart will be really gladdened by this. I think it would have been a really negative, retrograde step if we'd have gone into this small-minded shell. We've tried expansion in our home territories over the last 20 years, and we've grown a lot of grassroots rugby league in the UK. The growth of the game outside the heartlands at a semi-professional level has not been as successful as we've wanted, but I don't think you can let that kind of situation hold you back. I think a lot of doubt about the American market has come from people who say, well, you're never going to take on American football, you're never going to take on the high-profile professional sports over there. No, you're not, but neither do you have to. And I spent a number of years playing rugby union in the United States. It's a fantastically popular, high-number sport. Absolutely. My old club out on the West Coast had a Founders' Day just last Saturday, and they were playing rugby union from 10 in the morning till 5 in the afternoon. There were something like 150 people played rugby union on one field last week. So you've got a massive market to tap into. You don't have to see yourself as a competitor. grassroots soccer, as they call it, is absolutely huge. It doesn't need to challenge the NFL, the National Basketball Association. You've got Canadian teams that play in North American professional sports. I think that we can just tap into that absolute American love of competitive and particularly combative sports, which rugby league certainly is. And I think the world is the game's oyster if we carry on with what the club showed their intent on last week, and we embrace the opportunities.
Rick, I mean, look, there are people out there, supporters of other clubs, traditional clubs, that I think are a bit concerned how the influx of more teams with a lot of money would affect their clubs. We did see 4 clubs vote against it. They were Widnes, Lee, Rochdale and Hunslet. There probably is, subconsciously, even for the clubs that have proved a little bit of self-preservation and the concerns of how it may affect them, what would you respond to those clubs that worry about how New York and Ottawa could affect their aspirations in the game?
I don't think we affect many teams' aspirations unless we're not coming in to replace teams. We're coming in to add value. We want to come in and add to the competition. So we don't want to hanker down on people's ambitions and keep them down and whatever else. That being said, people have spoken about budgets and whatever else, but not all that budget that we've got to spend is going to go on players. It's got to go on development. It's got to go on marketing. It's got to go on transport. It's got to go on all those logistical sides as well. So while there is a budget there to spend, we're not just going to come in and flash the cash and spend, bringing NRL players left, right and centre. We've got to do things the right way. We've got to build from the grassroots in the States, and we've got to develop those American players and grow the player pool that's an offer.
I think what's really important for supporters and the game to understand is that the argument for expansion or the argument for New York or Ottawa or anything else is a very separate argument to the health of rugby league in our country here. Very different. Yeah. So let's not muddy the waters with the argument for expansion and say that if we expand, then that's going to hurt the game here. The game has to get its ducks in a row and everything in order here first. And that's expansion, yes or no, is not going to affect strength of other clubs in the M62 corridor, financial issues at club level and all of that. So very separate.
True, but I think if you look at it from Widnes and Lee's perspective, I mean, they were 2 of the clubs, so they have Super League ambitions. I don't want to put words in the mouth, but Danny, may they look at New York and Ottawa with loads of cash coming in and think, hang on, these might stop us from getting back into Super League.
Well, they've both had Super League. They've both had the ambition, and they're not there anymore. That's not expansion's fault.
They've shown how not to do it, haven't they? Yeah. With respect to them. And so I do think it's quite small-minded. I'd be interested to kind of read the minds of the Rochdale and Hunslet thoughts as to why they had reservations. And I do think that, for instance, Bradford Bulls, a big club that's fallen on hard times, that still belongs and wants to get back to the big time, but yet could see beyond that and look to the wider prospect of the game. Because if we do, at the moment, we're looking at the top of the championship now. You're looking at Toronto and Toulouse and saying, well, probably Toronto are going to be up there next year, knocking on the door. Great stuff, It's adding to the party. We want to sell this game, and with respect to Widnes and Lee, they've got a lot to prove before they're in any position to be knocking on that door again. And I would like to think that we can, if we can get the player pool growth, if we can get the marketing right, if we can get the people falling in love with this sport, that we can say, well, hold on, it doesn't have to be a 12-team Super League. We still can have a 14-team Super League if we have enough money, if we have enough successful clubs, if we're showing how the game can present itself on not just a national but an international level. So I like to think that you can allay a lot of the fears of clubs that are thinking, instead of us thinking, wow, we're going to be in the top 4 knocking on the door for Super League this year, now it's going to be 6, now it's going to be 8. Great, bring it on. Prove how good you can be and how deserving you can be of a place at the top table. And I would only like to think, because this is where my reservations would be, that Super League chairman can embrace that mindset too, as and when the time comes. Because, Eric Perez can say what he likes about, and Ricky too, about we've got modest expectations, we just want to compete. Yeah, right. It's business, it's sport. You want to race up that League One, you want to race up that Championship, and you want to be knocking on the door of the big boys as soon as you possibly can. So I buy the organic growth stuff, Ricky, you know, but save it for the bid. You know.
I'd raise the question, Danny. What's an easier sell for a fixture, and meaningful fixture in the Championship this year? Is it a game with Toronto in it? It is.
Yeah, it is.
It really is, and there are more column inches and discussion points around that.
Yep.
And it will be the same for New York. And that's no disrespect to a game against Barrow on Monday, Easter Monday, or Rochdale. But unfortunately, that's where the interest is at the moment.
This is Hollywood.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. And the reality is that the facts are there to prove that Toronto do draw bigger than other traditional clubs. You mentioned Rochdale and Hunslet. I think there's been some great coverage in the trades from following this. Neil Hampshire did speak in League Express, and his concern was, he said, you don't put parts of a train track down without knowing where the end destination is. And he wants to know what the RFL's long-term strategy is for expansion clubs and where they go. Ricky, I know you can't speak on behalf of the RFL, but he wanted to know where the game wanted to be in 2025, 2030. In your eyes, where the New York and Ottawa and Toronto come into the long-term vision of rugby league in 10 years' time?
In rugby league in general, worldwide, I think the long-term goal, and I don't want to put a time limit on it. I think the long-term goal has to be to create an American rival Super League. That's not us coming in and using the RFL as a stepping stone in any way, shape or form. But I think the longer-term goal has to be that rival competition to Super League and having British teams wanting to come and join that.
I think, yeah, I'm pleased we're seeing some positive news finally out of the United States as opposed to North America generally, because, of course, after the problems with the Denver test last year and what now looks like a failed 2025 World Cup bid, it's back to the drawing board a little bit on that. It was a big blow. I know there were plans for a professional rugby league competition in the United States. I saw the detailed plans probably 3 years ago now. They never went anywhere. I understand why. They're still trying to make professional rugby union take off in the United States. They've had 2 or 3 bites at it. It is a difficult market to tap. But New York, if any place has got a chance, it's New York. You have the athlete base. You can create a story that is very difficult to do in other professional sports. So I still think that that Super League, if you like, for North America is a long way down the track. But closer to home, and the concerns of Hunslet and Rochdale, we have to be looking outside. That's the only approach in professional sport, for my money. What direction? I get the lay in the track and all of that, but sometimes it's the old field of dreams, isn't it? Build it and they will come.
The question about laying the track is an excellent one, and with respect, it's not for the Rickies or Eric Perez's or the Rochdales to answer that question. It's for the RFL to answer the question. The NRL went through expansion, it went through a culling of sides, it went through a merger period, it went through a criteria, and whilst that was a difficult time for a lot of clubs, the results are there now down the track. I think the RFL, and one thing that could be a criticism from this bid process, and it's certainly not from the people that are bidding, or for the people that are bidding to be criticised, but there was no track laid out. There was no plan and said, we are going to be on February 1st next year accepting bids for expansion. These are the criteria you must add. This is what, and go out to open market and ask people. And I think that's where the Rochdales or other clubs might have a beef, because you don't know who could have been in that process. Was there someone, were Manchester Rangers, who have done a great job in getting that, they might like to have bid, or they might like to have looked at one of the failed licences down south and moved that there. But the fact that it wasn't said, we're going to market, this is what you're going to have to do to give everyone a chance, I think that's detracted a little bit from the good work that's being done, because there isn't that plan in place, and that's all the game has to do. If you fail and you don't get up there, well, you've known what the rules were, you entered into it and you didn't get a successful application, but that hasn't been laid out properly, and I do think that's a bit unfair on the process. And
ultimately as well, you talk about those concerns about expansion. The RFL's track record isn't too great, Danny. Celtic Crusaders, Oxford, Hemel, Gloucestershire All Golds.
Yeah, you know, with due respect to the RFL, you know, and the plans have always been good. The implementation has been very mixed. We do have some success stories, but ultimately, you know, Ralph Rimmer or Nigel Wood or whomever cannot go in and run the club for them. You know, when it comes down to it, the people who say, I've got the confidence in that plan, whether it be in Wales, whether it be down south, are the ones that have got to be charged with carrying it out. And if they fail in that, for whatever reason, ultimately, the buck has to stop with someone. We can't always just point back at Red Hall and say, well, you picked the wrong, you know, you backed the wrong horse.
I just think you need a
there.
process, Danny. You know, I mean, Ricky and the team from New York have worked on this for over 2 years. There have been other things pop up and people suggest Boston and all of this. All of a sudden, Ottawa come from left field and go, hey, we're putting a bid in. I think it just needs a bit of strategy, a bit of a plan saying we look to implement 2 extra clubs in expansion within the next 3 years. This is the process bid, just like the World Cup bid for hosting cities, which was a brilliantly thought through and a very well executed process, the World Cup bid, to find out who played where and all that. It was a great process. It was a mini Olympic bidding process without the Olympic bidding, you know, corruption and all of that. So it was brilliant and it was done well. I think that's the approach that needs to be done on the whole game strategy and the expansion, because, you know, clubs, the smaller clubs need to see, and the clubs that are battling, and they've done a great job in staying around and fighting for rugby league in their territories on their kick. I mean, they're spending money and the RFL doesn't have in marketing, etc. They need to know where they sit in the game.
Damian, I'm going to have to stop you there because we've had a really quick first part of the show. Coming up in the second part, you'll all have been shocked to find out that Shaun Edwards isn't actually coming to rugby league. We'll be talking about that after the break. Welcome back to the second part of this week's Rugby League Back Chat. Before the break, we were talking about New York and Ottawa, and I very rudely interrupted Damian. So, Damian, carry on with the point you were making.
Oh, no, the point was only that for great clubs and badges in rugby league that are traditional, just like Newtown in the NRL, etc., and West Magpies, the North Sydney Bears, there's still a place for them after expansion and in the game. And I just think the game has to show them where that is, because I would vote against something too if I didn't know what the future held out of fear or unknown. So that's the only point. I think you've just got to map it out for them, let everyone know where they stand, and the game will be fine on the back of that.
Ricky, just a few things before we move on. The stadium you're playing at Red Bull Arena, which is the same as New York Red Bulls.
Yep.
In terms of the recruitment, you will, just to clear up these myths, because there are people who love to say that they won't have to work under a salary cap. You do have to work under a salary cap.
Of course we do.
And how does it differ for you? Because obviously you're going to be based out in New York, so I guess it's more like Catalans in a way.
Similar, yeah.
How will that work under cap with accommodation and so on and so forth?
So, obviously, similar to Catalans, players would get a certain allowance when they first arrive, but then they, under their own wages, they'd have to source their own accommodation, so we won't be sourcing that accommodation for them. We can put them in touch with our real estate agents, but they can sort their own accommodations out. And again, paid in dollars.
Yep.
Pay tax.
Did you get
in the
my
States.
CV and my application for the media job?
I did. I've got that.
He got mine too, don't worry. And the exchange rate works the same as well. It sort of changes as the currency rate changes on your cap. So you've got to work on those challenges. And just find, and Ottawa are exactly the same, it should be said. Neither of you have disclosed who the financial backers are behind that. The due diligence has been done. The RFL are aware who they are. Yeah. Just explain why that hasn't been put out in the public domain. I
think it's just a case. It was similar with Toronto. Toronto didn't announce anything until they first came in. For I can only speak for us rather than Ottawa, but certainly for us, our investors just want to keep their heads down and let things take place until we get the yes. But once we get the yes, they're more than happy to.
And which of the 5 mafia families in New York?
As long as they pay for me as the media, I don't care. Moving on. Shaun Edwards, in the least surprising news of the year, he isn't coming to rugby league. Danny, I'm sure yesterday when you saw the statement, you fell off your seat in shock.
It was no surprise whatsoever. Shaun kind of, I think laid the groundwork for the announcement a few weeks ago, didn't he? I think it's disappointing for the game. I think it's incredibly disappointing for Wigan. I think it puts a lot of pressure now on Adrian Lamb's shoulders. I'm sure Ian Lennigan is smarting because he's a pretty. He considers himself, I think, a pretty sharp operator, does Ian, and I think he'll be disappointed that he didn't nail this down when he should have done. I think from Shaun Edwards' point of view, it makes sense. I didn't particularly buy his excuse that he put out there at the weekend. I don't have enough prep time. That's not it. I think the biggest thing two big things for Shaun. One, a stellar year for Wales, and the offers will be coming in, that probably eclipse anything he could get from Wigan. And two, he's looked at that Wigan squad and looked at that league table and thought, I don't fancy that. And
Damian, look, the press release came out. You could probably pick it apart. He said he didn't have enough preparation. Well, there was announced for the job 15 months before he was supposed to be taking it. He said he didn't think he was capable of taking it on. Well, why take it in the first place? It's just not a good look all round, really, is it, for anyone?
It's a really bad look. And you mentioned Wigan's current position, Danny, in this season. That's a direct result of all of this. I mean, no doubt. I mean, they brought Adrian Lamb in, who's done a job with what he can do. He was always in here as a caretaker. It set them back, there's no doubt. It set them back 12 months, and they should never have been in this position. Ian might well consider himself as a sharp operator. How it went that long without having a signature on paper, that's not sharp practice.
No, it's not.
No, it's not good enough. Now, if someone's let Ian down there or the negotiations have got that far without that, that's poor. So I think it's a shame for the Wigan fan. It's a shame for rugby league. Wigan has always been a brand that's been the epitome of elite performance on and off the pitch in rugby league. So it's a big black eye. When the national radio sport networks are starting to talk about rugby league and it's these sort of issues they're raising, it doesn't paint us in a great light as a game. No. And it's a slap in the face, I think, from rugby union and from Edwards, if I'm honest. And the game should. We should get together around this and go. We're not going to let that happen again. We're a far better sport than rugby union, I can tell you. And we should be stronger and say we're not going to entertain this kind of behaviour in the future. We shouldn't be treated like this as a sport. I feel for Wigan. I feel for their fans. At the end of it, could have been handled a lot better though, Danny. A lot better.
Ricky, with my rugby league hat on, it seems to me as it's just going to be more ammunition for rugby union people to fire cheap shots at rugby league and say this and that. It's not just damaging for Wigan. It's actually bad for rugby league as a sport, really. This, isn't it?
Potentially, yeah. Potentially. I mean, just bringing. You saw the fanfare last year when it was announced that Shaun was coming back, and there was a real buzz, certainly around Wigan, that they were getting the prodigal son back. So I think it's a real shot in the foot for Wigan.
It's the same for sponsors, for any people.
Absolutely.
If you're going to use our game, to better yourself or to let your employer know you might be looking elsewhere or you might want to get involved as a company, do you know what? Put your signature on that paper, contract yourself to it, and then use our game as much as you like because you're a part of it. But don't do it while you're half and half just having a lend. I don't think it's fair.
It's an interesting point, Jamie, because obviously in your current role, you're head of commercial at Bradford. Now, you'll understand the problems that this sort of thing can create. We talk about how it might affect the players, how it might affect the people at the top. What does this sort of PR disaster that I think we can call it affect?
Professionalism, Matt. The game struggles for blue chip style respect, if I'm honest, and it has for a little while. And that's not because of our working class background. It's because the game's stubbed its toe a number of times over the years in basic business practices and basic quality. Little things like not getting signatures on paper and being used in the press don't help. So overall, our reputation does hurt as a game. We're seen as a little bit off rugby league. They're a bit of a tin pot sport. They're a great sport on the pitch, but off field it's not run very well. It does affect you because companies that want to come and invest in the game have seen that incidents or incidences before, or all manner of things, clubs falling over, etc. And they've got so many different options in this modern world, Matt, to invest their money and put their brand next to, that it does hurt.
They will be chuckling at Twickenham about this. They will be loving this, and it doesn't come as a surprise to any of us sat around this table. No. I think, for me, I'm really disappointed on a personal level with Shaun. I know Ian, and again, you've got to take it back to Ian saying, I think when this broke a few weeks ago, he said, "Well, I've done lots of deals where we settled it on a handshake." Yeah, but
we settled it though, so it means it happened.
Yeah. So I feel for Wigan. I think it is a slap in the face for the sport. We'll move on. We'll get on. Let's concentrate on the good news, on the New Yorks and the Ottawas. Closer to home, I think we've got to look at the Wigan situation now and start worrying about them.
Who coaches them, Danny?
You've got that, but I'm more concerned with who's doing the recruiting at this point. Because I think Ian is a bit of I think he keeps decisions close to his chest. I don't think he lets a lot of authority get out there. But right now, you look at that player pool, you look at who's left them through the close season, you look at where they are now, and when Shaun Edwards is not on that field, they're only half the side. And I'm thinking, whether it's Chris Radlinski, whether it's Lamb himself, whether there's things going on in the background, but someone needs to be looking at how they rebuild the Wigan brand, and I think that is a critical point for the sport.
If it's Adrian himself, though, and if he's not here for next season, the year on, it's a very difficult position to be in.
It's a mess all around.
Yeah. You mentioned the rebuild as such. What do you make of Chris Radlinski's comments about the culture? He defended the culture at Wigan in light of the Gabe Hamlin. He's got the doping violation. Craig Mullen got charged with drink driving. It wasn't too long ago that Zach Hardacre was too.
Well, the Tompkins boys was
the Tompkins boys, and even a few years before that, John Bateman was suspended after something that happened in 2016. So, what did you make of those comments?
I think that the culture comments coming from the top are all fine and dandy, but you can't handcuff the guys once they finish their actual, the day's work, and I don't think it's. I think it is. It's unfortunately the characteristics of a lot of the people that we have in the sport more than it is a culture problem at Wigan or Leeds or any other club. I mean, Leeds bent over backwards to get Zach Hardacre on the straight and narrow. I think with the best will in the world, you dealt the hand you dealt with when you're dealing with, when you've got young men suddenly coming into a lot of money, high profile, and all the temptations that go with it. Whether we as a sport are best prepared for that, I don't know. But I don't think that any sport really is.
But I think when performance and when a great brand, I mean, Wigan were untouchable as a brand and as a club. They had the highest levels of performance. They were the benchmark in so many ways. And now they're not. And they've had a few things off field. And I think what Matt's getting at is that's mounting up when questions have to be asked. They mirror another massive brand in rugby league, which were absolutely untouchable for so long, in the Brisbane Broncos at the moment. And the Brisbane Broncos now, they're a bit of a laughing stock. Clubs are no longer in fear of going to play them. They don't even, we're not surprised when something happens in the press or players misbehave and performances drop off. That was unheard of 4 years ago. You would never ever be seen to be mocking or just thinking, the Broncos are not up to that standard. And so two big brands through the 80s and 90s are very similar in that way, that these untouchable rugby league brands are starting to just, there's some chinks in the armour there, and it needs to rectify pretty quickly.
Ricky, these are the sort of issues I'm sure at some point down the line you may have to deal with. If you were at Wigan now, how would you talk about trying to rebuild that brand? How would you try and go about doing it?
I think, certainly from our perspective, we've been really key about. Obviously, we've had players and agents getting in touch with us about players and wanting to sign for New York. We've been really big about creating that culture because of the travel, because of everything else, because of the brand, and it's a brand new brand going into a massive sports market. We need to have the right players involved. We need to have the right people involved, most importantly. And I just think you look at some of the recruitment that Wigan have had over the years, or in recent years, and you just think, are they ticking those similar boxes? And you'd probably argue that they're not.
On the head coaching front, you will potentially soon be looking out for a head coach. Where are you at in those? As you said, you've been inundated with calls from players and agents. I'm sure coaches haven't been too far away either.
Yeah, I think we're pretty much settled on who we're going to take forward. I've been in discussions with them over the last couple of weeks. Similar to the Wigan situation, we've not signed a contract yet. So that could all change. No, we're pretty settled on who we're going to get, and as soon as we've got the yes, then we've got a contract ready for them.
Is there a timescale on that? Have they actually told you when you will have an answer, Ricky?
We're hoping within the next 3 weeks.
Great.
So
The only
I think
thing I'd
I think
say
much later than that, we're pushing towards maybe
recruitment
2021.
recruitment technically starts
Yeah.
in by May 1st, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So
You mentioned there, Ricky, you've had a lot of calls from players and agents and all of that. And the only thing I'd say, and we talk about Wigan and Broncos and where it goes wrong with clubs, you're in a really, you're in a buyer's market here, mate. You've got a fantastic brand, you've got a fantastic location. It's up to you who you build and who you build your culture. And I wouldn't take a call from an agent.
No.
You know, I would go and I would choose and identify the people you want, and I would go and approach them because, generally speaking, the people that are chasing it and the agents that are calling, you know, they might not be the people you want. No. You make the decision. You've got all the balls in your court, mate, and it's a fantastic place to be, and you can start it from scratch.
Yeah.
I do think it's about the personalities that will make it or break it, and I think that you look at successful clubs and you look at particularly the Leeds Rhinos of the last 10 years, and you get a player group that you think these guys are leaders, and they're leaders not just on the field but in character and how they bring people through around them, and I think that is key to building any sports
We've
franchise.
talked about Zach and other people, with all due respect, and this is not about individuals, but the agent's not going to be there at 2 a.m. in New Jersey when you're saying a few of the boys had too many beers after a barbecue. They're not there. No. You are, and you're the one who's going to have to be fronting it up.
on this front, I want to get on to Saints, so I don't want to stay on this too long. How are New York and Ottawa going to affect the player market, not only in the player pool initially, but the salaries? Because a lot of people have said that Toronto have basically pushed the salaries up. Is that going to happen again, Damian, now?
The game pays way too much for player salaries here in a lot of ways. At the top end, the top Super League boys are earning a little bit too much, and at the lower end they're earning a little bit too less. There's a lot of middle ground that's just a little bit above average. I don't see that affecting the market at all. There are enough players. Again, we've got to be proud as rugby league and go, you know what, it's a privilege to play our game. There are only so many League One, Championship and Super League professional contracts out there. There are enough players to fill them, and you've got to pay what you can afford to pay.
Yep.
Don't overpay.
Danny, we've only got about a minute left of this part. Just wrapping up on Wigan. Yep. Where should they be looking for a head coach now? Should it be Adrian Lamb? Should it be a young British coach? Another person like Shaun Edwards who knows the club very well? I
think they should be phoning Ricky up and saying, can you throw us a few dozen of those CVs from coach? I'm sure that they've got a plan. They're shrewd operators. Will it come from within the domestic group or will it come from Australia? I think we know the answer to that. I think it'll probably be an Aussie. They could do a lot worse than ask Sean Wayne to come back.
No temptation on a James Ford, a Richard
You'd love
Marshall?
to think so. You'd love
to see that.
The job he's done at York is fantastic, and Halifax too. But I think they'll go with the safe bet, and the safe bet these days, sadly, seems to be the NRL.
Fair enough. Well, it's a very, very busy week coming up. Easter period is massive for all clubs in their aspirations. We'll be talking about that and the Super Saints right after this short break. Welcome back to the final part of this week's Rugby League Back Chat. Gents, a big period coming up. It is Easter, and we all know how important that is for clubs. But before we go on to that, just quickly, St Helens, Danny, what a performance. It was billed as the big one against Warrington, and they showed up.
Yeah, they did. That was 5-star. If they can't play like that every week, you know, thank the good Lord for the sake of the competition, because otherwise we could give them every piece of silver now. But we know that, you know, it is swings and roundabouts. Fortunes change. Nothing went right for Warrington on the night. Everything stuck for Saints, and that was kind of the boost they needed. after the defeat at Catalans. I think that when Johnny Lomax is on the field, I think that he changes the game for them. I think Lachlan Coote has been a terrific addition to the squad. I'd like to see him involved in the Lions setup at the end of the year. And that Saints back is as good as anything in the game right now. What can go wrong? Well, as we know in this sport, things do, and it's usually injury led. But if they stay healthy, the bookies will be paying out early, I think.
Well, Ricky, Easter can be a defining period for any club. In Super League and Championship this year in particular, it's that tight. Teams could catapult up the league, they could shoot down the league. Probably in Super League, the biggest plot over Easter is going to be Leeds, though. Right at the bottom, they've got games against Wakefield and Huddersfield. If they were to lose those two games, would it be panic stations?
Possibly. It might already be panic stations, the amount of money that they spent. But I just think the Easter weekend it just throws up so many variables. Not just Easter, the two games over Easter, but certainly the third game as well. So I'm not sure who Leeds have got the third game.
I think it's OKR.
So they've got three real cup final games, and then probably going to a cup game as well against Bradford. So
about that one.
So they've got a few. They've got to raise the game a little bit. They'll get confidence from last week's result against Workington. But yeah, potentially it could be a banana skin weekend for them. I think the big one is Huddersfield. They've gone under the radar a bit the last couple of weeks, and they've really raised the game and gone from being close to the bottom to being eighth and pushing
2 points off the playoffs.
Yeah.
So Damian, Super League. Before we touch on the Championship, incredibly tight this year. Wigan and Saints have obviously scored. Warrington and Saints. They got there eventually. Have scorched ahead. The rest, it's so tight, isn't it? It's been, you can't tip anything at the minute.
I think Warrington deserve absolute plaudits. I mean, what they've done and built up to this season so far, and I do hope it becomes a bit of a clash between them and St Helens late in the season. But the rest of the games are so meaningful every week on week. Anyone can beat anybody. That's what you want. It's what you want in the competition. So credit to everyone who's got it there and is doing it. I think you mentioned your Leeds, Huddersfield, Wakefield. Big Easter for all of them. Yeah. All of them. It could set the rod in for clubs who don't win. If you don't win both your Easter games out of any of those three, it is panic stations.
I'm waiting for. We should run a sweepstake on the first coach to complain about having to play back-to-back games over Easter. But get used to it, guys. But I do think that certainly with the Leeds situation, I mean, they're going to get Wakefield at the right time in terms of the injuries.
Yeah.
That was a terrific win over. You've got to acknowledge it was a depleted Wigan. As we said, there's no Lachlan out there. But Wakefield always continue to surprise me.
They're a scrapping side. They can scrap with anyone, mate. They'll fight out of it.
But I thought when they lost Bill Tupou and Tom Johnson, two of the best strike players in the competition, I thought, no, that's them gone. But they still keep turning out. But I just, they've got to find bodies to put on the field, and that's their problem right now. So I think Leeds are getting them at exactly the right time. But beyond that, I do think that we have a competition at the moment that is defined by injuries. I think that, if Danny Maguire isn't playing, OKR aren't performing, you look at Castleford, and I know Jake Truman's a really promising young man, but they're really struggling in midfield, and I think that will have the biggest outcome on the competition.
I'm going to pick you up on a point. You said get used to the games over Easter, but then you said we've got a competition defined on injuries.
Yeah, but we know ahead of the season starting just how the fixtures are going to fall. Heaven forbid that we sometime have a reserve competition, Matt. So that they would have players that can step up into the breach as opposed to bringing academy kids in and throwing them in at the deep end. That's a problem of the club's own making. That's not the RFL's fault. That's the Super League clubs that won't invest in that. And I think at times like this, that is the argument to put back to coaches that are complaining.
How many times are back-to-back matches during a season? Just the once at Easter time?
Yeah.
I mean, please. Origin's been doing it for 15 years. It's the toughest competition. I mean, if you know it's coming on once, budget for it, prepare for it, and rotate, coaches should have been rotating and looking to solve that problem last week and the week before, managing it. In this day and age, I think, games you have to be playing. We're up against football here. They play every bank holiday, every Easter. We've got to do it. You've got to play. You've got to be getting people through the gates. So unfortunate, it's just going to have to happen. But I think reserve grade's the answer.
I think you talk about big weekends. It's a big weekend for London.
I was just going to mention them, Ricky. So you go and talk about.
So I think if they can get a win on Thursday against Catalan
at home
on that pitch, then that sets them up for a real big Easter weekend and Easter break.
They're doing a great job.
Yeah,
They really are.
I don't want to leave out the two Hull clubs. Look, Hull FC have been literally the epitome of this season. They have won games you would probably not expect them to win. Then they got hammered by Warrington. You've got Salford in there as well, who went to Catalans and thrashed them, but can't win at home. For all these clubs, there's no room for budges at the minute, because if you have a bad Easter, if you lose all three, you're suddenly down at the bottom. You win all three, you're the next best behind Warrington.
I think you could actually get to the point now where you say if you win those 3 games, you're safe. It's that tough out there. I mean, I thought that we're seeing some terrific entertainment. I'm not sure all of it is a result of the very highest grade rugby league being played, but in terms of putting on a show for the fans, that Catalans Hull game was just absolutely terrific. And I know that Ben Aguash and the Dragons people feel that they get a bad break from English officials all too often, and I thought they were very unlucky on Saturday. I really did. But the fact is, and I'm not a fan of Golden Point, not a fan at all. That was terrific viewing.
It's manufactured, Damian. Great moments, hasn't it? It's manufactured unforgettable moments at Golden Point.
Golden Point, it's here. It's here to stay. It's going to be what it is. It's worked in the NRL. It's now part and parcel of rugby league there. It created that great moment, in that match you just said. It created a great moment in the Challenge Cup with Bradford winning on the bell against a fantastic Featherstone performance. So that's Golden Point, and I personally would like to see maybe both sides get something out of the draw at the end in the league competition.
So change the point system.
I personally think both sides should get a point for the draw for getting to a 2020 result after 80 minutes, and if there were a bonus point of 1 to win it in the Golden Point, I'd be happy with that. Okay. But because I think 80 minutes is a long time to get done in Golden Point, where the rest of the 80 minutes seems to be set aside. I'd probably even, I'm not a big fan of the drop goal, the drop out shootout either that happens. No. But I think it's as good as it's going to be in balance. It's been tried and tested in the NRL for a long time, and I'd stay with it. It's great.
You mentioned the Challenge Cup. As a result of that Jordan Lilly drop goal, you've now been presented with a game at home to Leeds. Could you have wished for a possible better draw than
the
that?
Challenge Cup, it's fantastic. And if you'd said 6 weeks ago that the Bulls would be involved in that sort of game in Leeds and for the Cup competition, it's really good. I've said it before that I don't think we honour the Cup enough. It's something the NRL have never had. Australia's never had a good cup competition across different divisions. And people thrive on that. Supporters love it. They love the upset potential. And to see that match and, for Leeds to finally be coming back to Odsal in a great big cup tie, it's massive for the people of Bradford and for Leeds supporters, and really good for the game. So excited. And, I've got to put credit to Featherstone. I mean, they absolutely gave it to Bradford Bulls on Sunday for 65 minutes, all of 65 minutes. They were on top by 18 points leading into the last 10. So I do feel for them a little bit, because they really came as a great cup team, and they had no dual reg players. They were 7 starters short. A pretty big performance. I think it's been lost a little bit in the glory of the win and all of that, but Featherstone should be very proud of that.
We were talking off there about the days when we used to see Bradford Leeds attract 24,000 people. What do you think you can attract for that Challenge Cup game?
Oh, look, it's exciting already. People, and it was only last night the draw. I think if there's not 15,000 people there, at least you'd be disappointed. It's one of those meaningful one-offs that the fringe people and the cities will get together and get around. So here's hoping.
Yeah. It's the boost that the game needs. There's the Wigan Warrington draw that'll make for great viewing. But and I think it's the boost that the RFL need, because as you say, Damian, the Challenge Cup has kind of flown a little bit under the radar. We started the season with some terrible publicity for it in terms of who's in, who's out, putting up bonds. I think looking at the draw and looking at the possible outcomes, there will be 1 or 2 nervous people in Red Hall hoping that the results go their way. But that's the glory of the cup for you.
I think Doncaster as well. Doncaster have got a real good draw at the home of the champions now. So, yeah.
And obviously we'll have guaranteed a championship team in the quarterfinals, which is inevitably a good move. So we'll move on to the championship. It's a big week for Bradford. In this, you've got Halifax first and foremost, and very much like Super League, it is a competition where 2 or 3 wins over Easter, and Toronto have stretched away, haven't they? Toulouse have nudged a little bit further ahead, but after that, it's a free for all.
What a great competition again. I mean, the fact that we talked expansion to start off the show, and you've got Toulouse and Toronto there dominating and playing very good rugby. York are really keeping up their reputation as being a well-coached and a very good side, a well-run side. We've got obviously the Bulls in there. You've got clubs that are just proper championship clubs like your Dewsburys and Halifax, as you say, who they know the competition so very well and can beat anyone on their day. Every weekend there are 2 or 3 clashes there which you'd go and easily spend your money and walk up as a casual fan and watch. So again, credit to all those clubs in the RFL for that competition. And I think you're finding, contrary to all the talk last year about Super League and breakaways and all of that, you're finding that bottom 4 of Super League and Championship, I believe, closer than you ever will see. That's why I think that clash Leeds and Bulls is very interesting as well. Leeds down that bottom end and struggling a little bit in Super League with a side who's just coming into some form in Championship. So it'll be interesting to see a form line. Championship's going great.
Yeah, and the proof was that Halifax obviously beat London. Lee very nearly beat Hull KR. Ricky, I'm sure that you'll be keeping an eye on the Championship, what's going on. I'm sure you'll be watching players from that competition. In terms of a product, we talk about products and building the game and it being as marketable as possible. The Championship over the last few years has become just that, hasn't it?
I think it's great to watch. I've got some real good contacts with Toulouse, so I've been to watch a few of their games this year. I think it's great to watch. I think it's a real good, especially Toulouse. I'm speaking first hand from watching them, but they play a real exciting brand of rugby. That typical Gallic flair, throw the ball around, want to score tries, want to score points. It's an entertaining game to watch.
I think what it speaks to is the quality of players that we do have available in the sport, and it comes down to opportunity. Is all. You look at Huddersfield. They've got lads, ex-Bradford players that starred in the Championship, but have taken their game, to the next level once they've been given a Super League opportunity. And I think that you look at that Halifax performance, and it isn't as though London put out a weakened side, anything like that. I think you could make a case perhaps for the Broncos having one eye on, Super League survival. Then they don't realistically think they're going to get to Wembley. Maybe that was a little bit of a factor, but still, for Halifax to turn them over in that style was something else. And it comes right back down to just the quality of the players on the field. The one thing, the disappointing result for me was Workington at Leeds. I thought that was a real blowout. And when you look at the Workington side, they have players in there that you would think belong at the top end of the Championship and not in League One. Yeah. So I was disappointed in that, but you are always going to get that. When you get one.
You get it because there is a very different style of rugby and officially done at Championship level, and the ruck is quite a bit slower, Danny. And if a Super League team get a roll on with quick play the balls and that, I tell you, it could be 24 points.
The other team just don't see the ball.
Yeah.
Well, I was at the Salford-Rochdale game, and that was exactly the same. So Rochdale just couldn't keep up the pace. League One, we mentioned Workington. On paper, they've got a really strong squad. And you look at some of the others at the top. Newcastle have got a great squad. Hunslet looks strong as well. Everyone might think that you're just going to skyrocket through these leagues. It's not going to be easy in year one, is it?
No.
Depends how many of them you take.
No, it's not going to be easy at all. And we're well aware of what's expected and where we expect to be. So
I do hope that you generate some American players, Ricky, because they've some terrific athletes and they lend themselves perfectly to rugby league, better I think than rugby union. I know we had a kid going around the Championship circuit last year or the year before, Monty Gaddis came over, but and that wasn't a success story in itself, but I think there are some out there to be uncovered.
You've got some trials out on the eastern coast, haven't you?
Yeah, so the plan is to have 4 week-long tryouts up the east coast.
So where will they be roughly?
So roughly there'd be Florida, Atlanta, New York, New Jersey, and going up to Boston. Yeah. So we'd have 50 athletes come stay with us for a week, coaching staff would be involved. We'd house them, we'd feed them, but they'd be undertaking like a real intense week-long training session. And then hopefully by the end of that week, we might be able to get 2 or 3 players who we think are good enough to.
I think like anything, you're not going to struggle to find wingers and probably your centres and those running style athletes. It's that spine, which is going to be important, the rugby league knowledge, and probably you're going to need a good defensive coach, I think, to just get that inside and outside sliding defence worked out for the American players. But obviously, it'll be the boys that you put around them, which are going to be interesting. I can't wait. I wish it starts tomorrow in New York.
I think we all feel exactly the same. Well, that's all we've got time for on this week's edition of Rugby League Back Chat. A big thanks to my guests for their involvement, and we'll be back next week for another edition of Rugby League Back Chat. Bye for now.